Okay, so we're going to have a look at how we control different elements of the saturation of this image. So first thing I normally do when I'm working on something like this is just make a copy of the background layer. I don't think I need it right now for this image, but I might need it later, so I tend to do that just as a safety net in case I mess something up. So here I'm going to come down to my adjustment layers, okay, and add a hue saturation adjustment layer. So essentially what I want to do is kind of take a little bit of the focus away from these bright apples and this sandwich and the blue knife and stuff in the background, and so it's focused on the main subject, which is this tasty chicken sandwich that you can see in the foreground. So if we desaturate it, that whole image, okay, and we don't want to put all the color out of it, we want a little bit of color in the background, then essentially we can do this, and what we're doing with the hue and saturation adjustment layer is just hiding it in parts of the image where we don't want it to be. Okay, so we can tweak different parts of this image to be more or less saturated. Okay, so for this, the technique is simple. We're going to grab the brush tool, we're going to flip it to black and white, and when you're flipping between black and white here, I know a lot of you are working with the brush tool a lot, it's just X to flip it between black and white. So you just tap X on the keyboard and you can see it flips between black and white. So if you're doing a lot of painting or drawing, then that's a useful shortcut to kind of have. So basically I'm going to check that this is a nice soft-ish edged brush, probably around 30-40%, and then just paint back in to the areas of the image that I want to be colored or have more color in them. Okay, and it's also quite nice for removing any, like the bottom of the image there is a little bit yellow, so as we drop that saturation, like the plate there is catching a bit of that yellow, so we can pull more of that color out of there too. Okay, now as I'm doing that, I'm also kind of thinking back to where we were in week 1 and kind of using these hue saturation adjustment layers and that type of thing, and people feel comfortable when I show that kind of technique. Now you kind of get a good grasp of what's going on in terms of what we're doing with the different layers there. Yeah? No? Not sure? Okay. So anyway, that's the first thing I wanted to mention. So I'm using Command or Control plus and minus to kind of zoom in and out here, and then we can just kind of go through the image and add in the color back into parts of the image. And you can see where the X becomes useful because I just went slightly over the edge there, so I can just hit X and just kind of brush it back in as I see a mistake. Okay. So we've got the hue saturation. Has everyone eaten before they came here? I'm not going to show lots and lots of pictures of food. Okay, but I'm sure everyone's seen this kind of image where people have pulled the contrast of an image and in terms of the color, so accentuating the color in one part of the image. The classic kind of movies for this are Sin City, where like there's lots and lots of black and white with little shots of color, so it's really kind of heavily designed, and it's essentially the same technique, okay, except when you're doing that kind of color grading on video or film, it's a lot more time consuming. Okay. The nice thing about this as well is that if we do kind of desaturate that background completely, we can, oh, I've missed some bits here, got some grey lettuce, don't buy that. We can mix it as well in the opacity, so we can mix that colour up and down to kind of accentuate different parts of the image, okay, which is one of the real advantages of using those adjustment layers. Okay. We can also, if we add another adjustment layer below this, a curves adjustment layer. Has anyone had a play with curves yet? Hands up who's explored curves a little bit. So we've looked at levels so far in class, but curves work slightly differently in that you can target your adjustments a little bit more. Okay, so when we're working with curves, we can essentially kind of lift or lower different parts of the image, like in terms of the amount of color within certain parts of the image. So we can darken the highlights, lighten the dark areas of the image so we can pull them up. Okay, but what you'll see in a lot of photography that's got a kind of color look to it is that people are adjusting the individual channels of those curves. Okay, so for instance, if we want to accentuate the green here, we could go into the green part of the curves. This green here is in the midtones somewhere, so you can see there's a lot of color in the midtones. So if we pull that up, then we're going to add a lot of green to the whole image, and it's going to accentuate the lettuce, and then we just go in there and mask the lettuce out and kind of make it pop. Okay, if you ever get a chance, watch a video on how they do food photography. It's really impressive. They cut the back out of a hamburger like a triangle and then push it out to make it look bigger than it actually is. So there's some good videos on YouTube on that. So, and then it's obviously photoshopped as well. Yeah, so we can do things like that. We could push up the red of the tomato there, and then if we wanted to kind of just have it hit those different parts of the image, we could invert, so Command or Control and I, invert that mask, and then use the brush tool to kind of paint back in that change just on the lettuce and that kind of stuff. So we can kind of pull in some of that saturation. Okay. Let's see if we've improved it. It's a little bit brighter and a little bit punchier. So we've gone from that, where the color in the image is completely overwhelming, to that where we've kind of controlled where the color is in the image. Okay. All right. Save this.
So, with like if you go back to the curves,
Yep.
just like if you go to red, so like the tomato is the only kind of reddish thing on here.
Well, there's red in the whole image, right? So
There's like a huge spike in the highlights, but there's like no red highlights. So how do you know where the tomato is in that graph?
well, the red is, you're going from the dark areas of the image here to the midtones around here, and then to the highlights here. So the tomato would probably be this, because it's somewhere in the midtones. Okay, whereas this darker area of the image here,
I don't know what that is.
well, if you look at the red and the green and the blue, they've all got spikes there, so that's what's mixing together to make the grey and everything else as well. So there's still colour in those parts of the image, in the darker parts of the image as well. So yeah, so you can see the colour mix for the whole image here, where there's a lot of dark areas of the image, there's a lot of midtones, but not a lot of bright white areas of the image.
Right.
Okay, so you can kind of make a guesstimate as to where those different colours are in the image. My guess is that's the tomato,
So
right
if you
there.
change your layer, your mask on this, is that going to change that graph?
If I change my mask here,
Yeah. Is that only showing based on your graph, or is that showing for?
this graph,
Yeah.
that's a good question. I know that when we look at the,
It looks like it's changed since it's
yeah, if we look at the histograms here, so from window,
yeah.
we can see all the channels, so we can see how they're mixing together.
So all those have a huge spike in the highlights, and then
Yeah.
curved, you're just using it as more kind of.
Yeah, it's slightly more compressed as well. So we've still got those two
Is
spikes.
that because it's underneath your desaturation?
Sorry?
I'm just wondering why it's so different from Instagram, or how come it just changed so drastically from the everything moved from the highlights to the midtones? Yeah.
Good question.
It's a good thought.
Yeah. The red, green, and blue look the same. The RGB does look different, but I'm not sure if it's because it's compressed. Maybe it's not going to open up any more than that. So, any other questions about that?
And so with the, because you want to highlight the yellow, that's why you selected yellow color. Essentially making, oh no, but then like, way back at the beginning.
Oh, here?
Right, you did select yellow.
No, I didn't select yellow for any reason over there. That was from something else. So,
Okay, so for the colors, a little bit further down in the middle.
here?
Those colors.
Yeah. That's from a different project. That's nothing to do with what we're doing at the moment, yeah.
That totally messed me up.
Yeah, so everything that we're doing is in these adjustment layers. So, and you can't, like, if you wanted to get yellow, you'd be pushing the red and green up together, right? So, okay. All right, let's save that. I'm gonna